Have you ever found a dead body? I found one last Tuesday, and I still can't sleep. I work maintenance at a storage facility, the giant kind with climate-controlled units that rich people use for their extra furniture. Been doing it 3 years. Mostly it's checking locks, fixing lights, making sure the homeless haven't broken in. Last Tuesday, this woman came to the front desk crying. Said her ex-husband died 2 weeks ago. She's the executor, and needs to clear his unit before the month ends, or she'll owe another payment. Unit 4-47, she said, handing me paperwork. I can't go in there myself. Too many memories. Would you mind just checking what's in there? I'll pay you extra. I felt bad for her. Gave her my cell number, said I'd text her an inventory. Unit 447 was in the basement level, the premium temperature-controlled section. The lock was already cut, which was weird. The woman said her ex's lawyer had done it after he died since nobody had the combination. I rolled up the door. Inside looked normal. Furniture covered in sheets, boxes labeled kitchen and books, an old motorcycle under a tarp. I started taking photos for the inventory. Then I noticed the smell. Sweet, chemical, wrong. Like rotting fruit mixed with cleaning supplies. In the back corner was a large freezer chest, the industrial kind restaurants use. Still humming. Still running. The smell got stronger as I approached it. My maintenance key included a master that opened most padlocks. The owner insisted we have access in case of emergencies. This lock clicked open. I lifted the lid. It wasn't what I expected. No body. Just Tupperware containers, dozens of them, frosted over and stacked neatly, each labeled with dates going back 2 years. I picked one up. Through the frost, I could see something dark inside. Meat, maybe? But the label said, Sarah, March 15th, 2023. Sarah, a person's name. I dropped it. The container cracked on the concrete floor. The lid popped off. A human heart, partially frozen, slid across the floor. I stumbled backward, knocking into the freezer. More containers tumbled out, each with names and dates. Ely, July 22nd, 2023. Jennifer, November 30th, 2022. Tyrone, January 15th, 2024. I ran. Made it to the hallway before vomiting. Called 911 with shaking hands. There's body parts. In a freezer. Multiple people. The cops arrived in minutes. The entire building was evacuated. Taped off. Detectives questioned me for hours. They found 14 containers, each with organs from different people, all preserved perfectly. The woman who asked you to check the unit, the detective said. Describe her. I did. Blonde, maybe 40, had been crying, wore a wedding ring. He showed me a photo. This her? Yeah, that's her. That's Sarah Landon. She's one of the victims. Went missing March 15th. My blood went cold. That's impossible. I just saw her 2 hours ago. Are you sure it was her? She had the paperwork. She knew the unit number. The detective's phone rang. He answered, his face going pale. They found the owner of Unit 447, Richard Landon. Bodies in his apartment. Been dead about 3 days. Suicide note confessing to the murders. But the woman said he died 2 weeks ago. What woman? We have no record of anyone coming to the facility today except you. I pulled out my phone to show him her number. The text thread was gone. The number wasn't in my call history. The security footage from the front desk showed me talking to no one. Just standing there, nodding at empty air, then walking to Unit 447 alone. I think you need to come with us, the detective said. They kept me for 12 hours. Polygraph tests, psychological evaluations, checking my background for connections to the victims. Nothing. They had to let me go, but told me not to leave town. I went home, couldn't sleep, kept seeing that heart sliding across the floor, kept wondering about the woman who wasn't there. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Thank you for finding them. They needed to be found, but you weren't supposed to open the freezer. I called the detective immediately. The number traced to Sarah Landon's missing cell phone. Another text. Check your freezer. I didn't want to, but I had to. Inside my freezer, between the frozen pizzas and ice cream, was a new Tupperware container. The label read, Michael, November 19th, 2024. That's my name. Today's date. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw her. Sarah Landon, the dead woman, holding a cooler and smiling. We need to talk about what you found, she said through the door. And what happens next? I back away from the door, my feet catching on the edge of my carpet. Sarah Landon's face fills the peephole, that same calm smile from the storage facility, like we're neighbors catching up over coffee instead of a dead woman and the guy who found her heart in a freezer. My phone feels heavy in my hand. Detective Maddox's number pulled up, but my thumb frozen over the call button. Every part of me screams to run, to grab my keys and bolt through the back door, but I can't move. She knows my name. She was in my apartment somehow, put that container in my freezer with my name on it, with today's date, and now she's standing in my hallway holding a cooler like she's bringing over dinner. She knocks again, softer this time, 3 gentle taps that sound wrong coming from someone who shouldn't exist. Her voice comes through the door, muffled but clear. She says she understands I'm scared, that she'd be scared too, but she's not here to hurt me. The words sound so normal, so human, like something a friend would say after showing up unannounced. For just a second, I almost believe this is all a mistake, that maybe the detective showed me the wrong photo, that this woman at my door is just someone who looks like Sarah Landon, and I'm having some kind of breakdown from the stress. But then I remember the security footage showing me talking to empty air, the text messages that vanished from my phone, the way the detective's face went pale when he told me her body was found 3 weeks ago. My phone buzzes in my hand and I nearly drop it. Another text from that unknown number, the one that traced to Sarah Landon's missing cell phone. The message fills my screen in simple words that make my stomach twist. It says the police can't help with this. It says if I want answers about why my name was in that freezer with today's date, I need to open the door and listen. My finger hovers over Detective Maddox's name in my contacts, but I don't press it. What would I even say? That the dead woman is texting me instructions? That she's standing in my hallway right now? They already think I'm crazy, already put me through 12 hours of tests and questions, because the footage showed me talking to nobody. I walk to the door, each step feeling like I'm moving through water. My hand reaches for the deadbolt, and I hear my own voice in my head asking what I'm doing, telling me this is insane, but I unlock it anyway. I leave the chain on though, that thin metal link suddenly feeling like the only thing between me and whatever is happening. I pull the door open just enough to peer through the gap. Sarah Landon stands there in my hallway under the flickering light that I keep meaning to fix. She looks exactly like her missing person photo, the one Detective Maddox showed me. Same blonde hair, same face, same clothes even, a blue cardigan over a white shirt. But up close I can see through her, just barely, like looking at someone through foggy glass. The hallway light shines through her edges, making her look pale and thin, almost see-through. Her eyes, though, those are sharp and clear, and looking right at me with an awareness that makes my skin crawl. She starts talking before I can say anything. She explains she's not a ghost exactly, more like an echo of what happened. She says she's been trying to reach me since I opened that freezer, since I saw her name on that container and dropped it on the concrete floor. Her voice stays calm and steady, like she's explaining something simple and obvious. She tells me Richard Landon didn't work alone. There's someone else still out there, someone who helped him kill all those people, and that someone has marked me as the next person who knows too much. The words come out matter of fact, like she's telling me about the weather, but each one lands in my chest like a stone. I find my voice finally, ask her for proof. I tell her about the security footage showing me alone, about how the police think I'm having some kind of episode. My words come out shaky and too fast. I ask her to explain why I'm the only one who can see her, why she looks like she's made of fog and light. Sarah holds up her hand, palm facing me, and reaches toward the door. Her fingers pass through the chain like it's not even there, the metal offering no resistance at all. She moves her hand back and forth through it, the brass links sitting inside her translucent skin without touching anything solid. My stomach drops, and I taste acid in my throat. This is real. This is actually happening. A dead woman is standing in my hallway, passing through solid metal, telling me there's a killer who wants me dead. Sarah pulls her hand back, and the chain swings slightly from the movement of air around her fingers. She tells me Richard's suicide wasn't really suicide. His partner killed him when he got sloppy and left evidence behind, when he started feeling guilty and wanted to stop. The partner needed someone to blame, needed the investigation to close, so they staged Richard's death and wrote that confession note. But they didn't expect anyone to find the storage unit so quickly. They didn't expect Richard's lawyer to cut the lock and send someone to inventory the contents. And they definitely didn't expect Sarah to be able to reach out from wherever she is now, to make contact with someone who found the freezer. I lean against the door frame, my legs feeling weak. I ask the question that's been burning in my head since I saw that container. Why me? Why is my name in there with today's date? What did I do to end up on a killer's list? Sarah's expression changes, her face darkening even though no shadow crosses it. She explains that by opening the freezer and seeing what was inside, I created a connection to all of them. To her and Ely and Jennifer and Tyrone and the 10 others whose remains were stored in that unit. The act of seeing their names, of touching that container, of witnessing what was done to them, it linked me to them somehow. And now the killer sees me as a loose end, someone who might remember something or notice something that could lead back to them. My phone starts ringing, the sound loud in the quiet hallway. Detective Maddox's name flashes on the screen. I answer it, trying to keep my voice normal, trying not to look at the translucent woman standing 3 feet away from me. Maddox asks if I'm doing okay after the evaluation, says he wanted to check in. I tell him I'm fine through the gap in the chain-locked door, the lie sitting heavy on my tongue. I'm talking to a detective about being fine, while a dead woman stands in my hallway, explaining that I'm marked for death by a serial killer's partner. Maddox says to call immediately if anything unusual happens, if I remember anything else, or if anyone contacts me. I promise I will, and hang up before my voice can crack. Sarah waits until I lower the phone. She tells me the partner is someone I've already met, someone involved in the investigation who's been watching me to see what I know. My blood goes cold. Someone at the police station? Someone who questioned me? Someone who had access to all my information, my address, my schedule? Sarah says she can't tell me who directly, that there are rules about how her existence works, limits to what she can say or do, but she can guide me to figure it out myself. She can point me toward the truth if I'm willing to help bring them to justice, if I'm willing to risk my life to stop them from killing again. Her translucent face looks at me with an intensity that makes me want to shut the door and pretend none of this is happening. But that container in my freezer has my name on it, and somewhere out there is someone who put it there, someone who wants me dead, someone who's gotten away with 17 murders and isn't planning to stop now. I slide the chain off with fingers that won't stop shaking and step back as Sarah walks through my doorway like she belongs here. She moves past me without making a sound, her translucent form catching the light in ways that hurt to look at directly. I can see through her to the wall behind, can watch my furniture distort slightly as she passes in front of it. She heads straight for my kitchen and stops at the freezer, staring at the closed door like she can see through it to the container with my name inside. She turns to look at me, and her expression is sad, but determined. She tells me this is a warning, that the container represents what's coming for me unless we stop them first. The word them makes my stomach clench because it means there's more than one person involved in this nightmare. I lean against my doorframe trying to process that the woman standing in my kitchen is dead, that I saw her heart slide across a concrete floor just hours ago. Sarah explains that when each victim died, something of them remained behind, an echo of who they were. She says all 14 of them have been trying to reach someone who could help, someone who could see them and understand what happened. Most people who found the storage unit wouldn't have been able to perceive her at all, would have just felt a chill or a sense of wrongness. But I was different because I opened the freezer and saw their names, touched the containers, witnessed what was done to them in a way that created a connection. The trauma of discovery made me vulnerable to their world, made the barrier between living and dead thin enough that she could push through and make contact. I was the first person traumatized enough and open enough that they could reach me. Sarah moves through my apartment, examining my bookshelves and photos with an intensity that makes me uncomfortable. She picks up a picture frame with Caitlin and me at the beach last summer, but her fingers pass through the glass like it's not solid. She tells me to focus on the air around her, to look at the space near the walls and ceiling where shadows gather. I don't want to, but I force myself to concentrate the way she's instructing, squinting at the corners of my living room. At first, I see nothing unusual, just normal shadows from my lamp and furniture. Then something shifts in my perception like adjusting a camera lens, and suddenly I can see dark smears on the walls, handprints that weren't visible a second ago. They're everywhere, on my door frame and light switches and the handle of my refrigerator. Sarah says these are traces the killer left behind, residue from their presence that normal people can't perceive. She teaches me to notice how the air feels colder in certain spots, how shadows move wrong when nothing is casting them. The more I focus, the clearer it becomes that someone has been in here recently, touched my things, walked through my space while I was gone. The handprints lead from my front door to my bedroom to my kitchen, a path of violation that makes my skin crawl. I stumble to my bathroom and dry heave over the toilet, my body rejecting the reality of what I'm seeing. The killer was in my home while I was at the police station being questioned and evaluated. They touched my belongings, walked through my rooms, put that container in my freezer with my name on it. Sarah appears in the bathroom doorway and tells me they're playing with me, enjoying the fear and psychological torture. She says this is their pattern, how they operated with other victims before escalating to actual violence. They like to make people feel unsafe in their own homes, to strip away any sense of security before moving in for the final act. I wipe my mouth with shaking hands and ask how long I have, how much time before they stop playing and start actually trying to kill me. Sarah's translucent face shows sympathy, but also urgency, as she explains it could be days or hours, depending on how much I figure out, how close I get to identifying them. The container with my name is both warning and promise, a psychological weapon and a genuine threat. My phone buzzes on the bathroom counter and Caitlin's name lights up the screen. I stare at it for 3 rings before answering, trying to make my voice sound normal. Caitlin asks if I'm okay because she heard about what happened at the storage facility, something about police and evacuations and human remains. I can hear the worry in her voice and have to decide right now whether to tell my girlfriend that I'm talking to a dead woman in my bathroom while looking at invisible handprints a killer left on my walls. I keep it vague instead, telling her I'm dealing with police stuff and evaluations, that it's complicated but I'm physically fine. She offers to come over, says she can leave work early and be there in 20 minutes. Every instinct screams at me to say yes, to have someone real and solid here with me, but I remember Sarah's warning about the killer targeting people I care about. I tell Caitlin to stay away, that I need some time alone to process everything. The hurt in her silence cuts deeper than any physical wound, but I force myself to maintain the lie because if she comes here, she becomes another target. After I hang up, Sarah is standing right behind me, close enough that I can feel the cold radiating from her form. She warns me that the killer will target people I care about to isolate me, to make me vulnerable and alone. Caitlin is already in danger just from being associated with me, from being my girlfriend and someone I'd want to protect. Sarah says I have 2 choices, and neither is good. I can push Caitlin away completely, break up with her, and make her think I don't care, which might convince the killer she's not worth using as leverage. Or I can bring her into this, tell her the truth about the supernatural elements and the danger, which risks her life, but at least lets her make informed decisions about her own safety. Both options feel impossible. Both guarantee someone gets hurt. Sarah tells me the killer is probably watching my communications, monitoring who I talk to and what I say, using that information to identify vulnerabilities they can exploit. I pace my small bathroom trying to think clearly through the panic. Caitlin deserves to know the truth, deserves to understand why I'm pushing her away, or why her life is in danger. I call her back before I can talk myself out of it, and the words come out in a rush. Everything about Sarah and the translucent woman in my apartment, and the handprints on my walls, and the killer who's been in my home. There's a long silence on the other end, where all I can hear is her breathing. Finally, she asks if I'm having a breakdown, if the trauma of finding those organs has made me lose touch with reality. I don't blame her because that's exactly what I'd think too if our positions were reversed. I beg her to just be careful, to trust me enough to watch her surroundings, and maybe stay with a friend for a few days. She says she'll think about it and hangs up, leaving me staring at my phone wondering if I just destroyed my relationship or saved her life, or both. My phone buzzes again immediately, and this time it's a text from Francisco asking if I'm okay. The facility manager told everyone about the police investigation, about the freezer and the remains, and my involvement in the discovery. Francisco wants to know if I need anything, if there's something he can do to help. I stare at the message, realizing my coworker might be in danger too, because he has keys to all the units, could theoretically access evidence or information the killer wants to keep hidden. Francisco is another loose end, someone who could potentially discover something incriminating if he went looking. I text back that I'm fine, but he should be careful at work, should maybe take a few days off if possible. He responds asking what I mean, and I don't know how to explain without sounding paranoid or crazy. Sarah appears next to me reading the texts over my shoulder and confirms that Francisco is at risk, that anyone connected to the storage facility or the investigation could become a target if the killer feels threatened enough. Sarah and I spend the next hour going through everything I remember about the investigation, every person I interacted with at the police station. We sit at my kitchen table with my laptop open, me typing notes while she points to connections I wouldn't notice on my own. She can sense things about people, feel their intentions in ways I can't access, but she needs me to make the connections consciously for her abilities to work properly. It's like she can see the threads between people, but I have to name them and understand them before the information becomes useful. We list every detective and officer and technician who was at the storage facility, everyone who questioned me or processed evidence or had access to the crime scene. Sarah keeps circling back to Detective Maddox, the one who showed me her photo and asked if I recognized her. She says something about him feels wrong, like he knew more than he was saying during the interrogation. I pull up news articles about the case on my laptop, reading through details about the investigation and the victims. Something clicks in my memory about the way Maddox reacted when I described the woman who sent me to Unit 447. He seemed surprised when I gave specific details about her appearance, like he was testing whether I'd actually seen Sarah before or if I was making it up. But his surprise felt calculated, like he already knew what I was going to say. Sarah leans over my shoulder, her cold presence making the hair on my arms stand up, and confirms that Maddox has been investigating these murders longer than the official timeline suggests. She says he knew about some victims before they were reported missing, that he's been tracking the pattern for years without telling his department the full scope of what he discovered. This could mean he's been trying to catch the killer independently, or it could mean something much darker about his involvement in the crimes themselves. I pull up the county records website and start searching for Detective Maddox's background, while Sarah leans over my shoulder. Her cold presence makes the hair on my arms stand up, but I force myself to focus on the screen. She points to a link about graduating classes from local high schools, and I click through, scrolling down year by year. There, in a photo from 20 years ago, I spot Maddox's face next to another familiar one, Richard Landon. They're standing together at some school event, both smiling, both looking like normal teenagers who had no idea what their lives would become. Sarah's finger passes through the screen, indicating a small notation at the bottom about them being on the debate team together. I screenshot everything and text it to myself as backup in case something happens to my laptop. This connection was never mentioned during the investigation, never disclosed when Maddox showed me Sarah's photo and questioned my story. Either he didn't realize the connection himself, which seems impossible, or he deliberately hid it from the official record. Sarah makes a sound like wind through empty rooms, and I turn to see her staring at the corner of my living room where the shadows look darker than they should. The lights above us flicker once, then again, and the temperature drops so fast I can see my breath forming clouds in the air. Sarah tenses beside me, her translucent form becoming more solid as if she's concentrating hard on staying visible. Something else is here, something that makes the walls feel closer and the air taste like metal and fear. The shadows in the corners aren't just dark anymore, they're reaching, stretching across my walls with fingers that look almost solid, but move wrong, too fluid and too deliberate. I push my chair back from the table and Sarah moves between me and the shadows, her presence creating a barrier I can feel as pressure against my chest. She tells me, this is the killer's darkness, that doing these things so many times has created a footprint that exists beyond normal reality. Her voice sounds strained, like she's using all her energy just to speak, while holding back whatever is trying to reach us. The shadows pulse and grow, crawling up the walls toward the ceiling, while the temperature keeps dropping until my fingers go numb. I watch Sarah push back against them with her own presence, two impossible forces meeting in my living room and creating a pressure that makes my ears pop. The shadows recoil slightly, but push forward again, and I can hear something like whispers coming from them, words I can't quite make out, but that fill me with sick dread anyway. Sarah's form flickers like a candle in wind, and I realize she's struggling, that this confrontation is costing her more than she expected. The battle lasts maybe 30 seconds, but feels like hours, my back pressed against the wall as supernatural forces clash in front of me. Then suddenly, the shadows retreat, pulling back into the corners and fading until they look normal again. The temperature rises slowly, and I can breathe without seeing frost in the air. Sarah looks drained, more see-through than before, her edges blurring like she might disappear completely at any moment. She tells me that took almost everything she has left, that she can't maintain this form much longer tonight, but she'll come back tomorrow if I'm still alive to see her. The casual way she says that last part makes my stomach clench because she's not joking. She genuinely doesn't know if I'll survive until morning. Before she fades completely, Sarah tells me to look at the storage facility's employee records from 5 years ago. She says the answer to who the partner is lies in who had access back when the murders first started, who was there at the beginning and is still there now. Her voice gets quieter with each word until I'm straining to hear her, and then she's gone, vanished, like she was never there except for the lingering cold and the memory of shadows that moved with purpose. I'm alone in my apartment with the knowledge that someone is hunting me, someone who has both human intelligence and supernatural capabilities, someone who can send their darkness into my home while they're somewhere else entirely. I check all my locks twice and push my couch against the door for extra security, even though I know it won't actually stop what's coming for me. Sleep is impossible, so I spend the night at my laptop researching everything I can find about the storage facility's history. The company website has a page about their founding and growth, mentioning they opened this location 8 years ago and expanded to climate-controlled units 6 years ago. I dig through old news articles and business filings, looking for anything about employee turnover or management changes. What I find makes my hands shake as I take screenshots. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. 5 years ago, right around March when the first victim disappeared, 3 employees quit within the same month. The articles don't say why, just that the facility was hiring to replace maintenance staff and security personnel who had resigned. One article mentions the assistant manager was promoted to manager during this period to help with the transition. I search for the names of the people who quit, but find almost nothing, like they disappeared from public records after leaving the job. Dawn comes, and I'm still awake, my eyes burning and my body running on adrenaline and fear. I call in sick to work, my voice rough enough that my boss doesn't question it, and then I grab my keys. I need to see those employee files myself, need to know who was working there when this all started. The facility is only 15 minutes away, but I take a longer route, checking my mirrors constantly to make sure nobody is following me. I park 2 blocks away and approach through the alley behind the building, slipping in through the loading dock entrance that's always unlocked during business hours. The hallways are empty this early. Most tenants don't come by until later, and I move quickly toward the administrative offices on the 2nd floor. My heart pounds so loud I'm sure someone will hear it and investigate, but I make it to the manager's office without seeing anyone. The door is locked, but my master key works on interior doors too, something I've never been more grateful for than right now. Inside, the office smells like coffee and paper, everything neat and organized in a way that seems wrong for someone who might be a serial killer. I find the filing cabinet marked personnel and start pulling folders, photographing each page with my phone. My hands shake every time I hear footsteps in the hallway outside, every distant voice making me freeze and listen to see if they're coming this way. The files go back to when the facility opened, and I work backward through the years until I reach the ones from 5 years ago. There are the 3 employees who quit, their resignation letters brief and professional, giving no real reason for leaving. And there's the promotion paperwork for the current manager, showing he moved up from assistant manager to full manager on March 20th, exactly 1 week after Sarah Landon disappeared. His hiring date as assistant manager was 2 years before that, meaning he'd been here from almost the beginning, had access to every unit, knew every security weakness in the building. I photograph everything, my phone's storage filling up with evidence that might prove nothing in court, but tells me everything I need to know. A door slams somewhere, and I nearly drop my phone, shoving the files back into the cabinet and closing the drawer as quietly as possible. Footsteps approach the office, and I look around frantically for somewhere to hide, but there's nowhere, just a desk and chairs and filing cabinets with no space large enough for a person. The door opens and Francisco walks in, his eyes going wide when he sees me crouched by the filing cabinet with my phone in my hand. He demands to know what I'm doing here, his voice sharp with concern and confusion, and I have maybe 3 seconds to decide whether to trust him with the truth or make up some excuse that will sound ridiculous either way. Something about the genuine worry on his face makes me show him the photos on my phone, pulling up the timeline that shows our manager's promotion matching the first murder. I explain quickly about the connection between Maddox and Richard Landon, about Sarah appearing in my apartment and the shadows that attacked us, about how someone is still out there killing and I'm the next target. Francisco listens without interrupting, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something like acceptance. When I finish, he's quiet for a long moment, then tells me he's had his own suspicions about the manager. He says equipment goes missing sometimes, expensive tools that should be locked up, and there are gaps in the security footage that get explained away as technical glitches. He thought it was just theft, or maybe the manager being lazy about maintenance, but now he's wondering if those gaps were covering up something much darker. Francisco mentions the manager has keys to storage units that were never returned by previous tenants, units that should have been rekeyed but somehow never were, giving him access to spaces that aren't officially assigned to anyone. He pulls out his own phone and shows me a spreadsheet he's been keeping, noting dates when equipment disappeared and footage got corrupted, and I see the pattern immediately. Every gap lines up with a date close to when one of the victims went missing, the manager creating blind spots in our security system during the exact windows when he needed them. We decide right then to check the security archives together, looking for any footage from 5 years ago that might show the manager accessing Unit 447. Francisco knows where the old drives are stored, in the archive room down in the basement near where I found the freezer. The thought of going back down there makes my stomach twist, but we need proof. Something concrete that ties him to the murders beyond just suspicious timing and missing equipment. We take the service elevator down, the same one I used that first day, and the smell hits me halfway through the descent. Not the sweet chemical rot from before, but something similar. A memory my brain won't let go of even though the freezer is long gone, hauled away as evidence. The basement hallway stretches out exactly like I remember. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Concrete walls painted that industrial beige that's supposed to be calming, but just feels cold. Francisco leads me past Unit 447, and I can't help but look at the rolled-down door, now sealed with police tape and a new padlock. The archive room is at the end of the hall, a converted storage unit filled with old computer equipment and boxes of security drives labeled by year and month. Francisco starts pulling drives from 5 years ago, while I set up the old monitor and playback system they keep down here for reviewing footage. My hands shake loading the first drive, March through May from 5 years back, right when Sarah disappeared. The footage loads in grainy black and white, showing the basement hallway from multiple camera angles. We start scrubbing through, looking for our manager, and within 20 minutes we find him. There he is on March 14th, the day before Sarah vanished, wheeling a large equipment cart toward Unit 447 at 2 in the morning. The footage shows him unlocking the unit with his own key, going inside for 40 minutes, then leaving with the cart noticeably lighter. Francisco and I exchange looks, both of us knowing what this means, but neither wanting to say it out loud. We keep watching, finding more instances, dates that match up with when other victims went missing. Each time it's the same pattern, late-night visits to Unit 447, always with equipment that could hide what he was really transporting. I'm taking photos of the monitor with my phone when the temperature in the archive room drops so fast I can see my breath. Francisco grabs my arm, his eyes wide and fixed on something behind me. I turn slowly, and there she is, Sarah, but stronger than before, more solid, like she's drawing power from this location where so much of her nightmare began. Francisco screams, actually screams, stumbling backward into the shelving unit and sending old drives clattering to the floor. Sarah holds up her hands in what I think is meant to be a calming gesture, but her translucent form just makes it more terrifying. She apologizes for scaring him, her voice echoing slightly like it's coming from everywhere at once, but says time is running out. The killer knows we're getting close, she explains, and they're preparing to eliminate all witnesses today. She says it with such certainty that my blood goes cold. They're starting with Caitlin, she continues, to hurt me emotionally before finishing me off, and the way she says it makes clear this isn't speculation. This is something she knows, something she can sense through whatever connection exists between her and the killer. I pull out my phone immediately, hands fumbling, and call Caitlin. It rings once, twice, 3 times, 4. Voicemail. I try again. Same thing. Sarah moves closer, her form flickering slightly, and says she can sense Caitlin is in immediate danger at her apartment right now, that we need to go immediately if we want to save her. Francisco is still pressed against the shelving, his face pale, but when I start running for the door, he follows, both of us sprinting down the basement hallway toward the elevator. Sarah guides us, her translucent form somehow keeping pace, and when the elevator is too slow, she directs us to the stairs. We burst out into the parking lot and run for my car, Francisco jumping into the passenger seat while Sarah materializes in the back, sitting there like this is completely normal, like dead women ride in back seats all the time. I peel out of the parking lot and Sarah starts giving directions, telling me to take streets I've never heard of, shortcuts through neighborhoods I didn't know existed. She's guiding us through the city with perfect knowledge of every alley and side street, shaving minutes off what should be a 20-minute drive. Francisco keeps looking back at her, his mouth opening and closing like he wants to ask questions but can't form words. The drive takes 8 minutes, Sarah's shortcuts getting us there impossibly fast, and when we screech to a stop outside Caitlin's apartment building, my heart is hammering so hard I can barely breathe. Her apartment is on the 2nd floor, and we take the stairs 2 at a time, Sarah floating ahead of us, and when we reach her door, I see it slightly open, just a crack, which is wrong because Caitlin always locks her door, always. I don't think, just burst inside, and the scene that greets me stops my heart. The facility manager is standing over Caitlin's unconscious body on her living room floor, a syringe in his hand, and he looks up at me with complete calm, like he was expecting this, like this is all part of his plan. He actually smiles and says he was hoping I'd figure it out, that killing me here with her makes the murder-suicide narrative much cleaner, easier for the police to accept. His voice is casual, conversational, like he's discussing the weather instead of describing how he's going to frame my death. Francisco tackles him from behind before he can say anything else, both of them crashing into Caitlin's coffee table, which shatters under their combined weight. I rush to Caitlin, dropping to my knees beside her, pressing my fingers to her neck and finding her pulse strong and steady. Her eyes are closed, but she's breathing normally, and I realize he only just injected her, hasn't had time to finish whatever he planned, and we got here in time. Behind me, I hear Francisco and the manager struggling, furniture breaking, and then a sharp crack that makes me spin around. The manager throws Francisco off with surprising strength, sending him sliding across the hardwood floor and pulls a knife from somewhere inside his jacket. His calm demeanor cracks completely, rage transforming his face into something animal and desperate. He starts ranting, words tumbling out about how Richard Landon was weak, got emotional about the victims, wanted to stop after the 10th one. He had to be eliminated, the manager says, had to be set up as the sole killer to close the case and protect himself. He's pacing now, knife held low and ready, explaining how he staged Richard's suicide, wrote the confession, made it all look perfect, until I had to go and open that freezer, had to find what should have stayed hidden forever. Francisco is getting to his feet, blood running from his nose, and I'm frozen between him and Caitlin, calculating whether I can get to the door before the manager reaches us with that knife. Then Sarah materializes, fully visible to all of us, solid enough that she casts a shadow on the wall. The manager's face goes completely white, all the blood draining away, and he actually drops the knife. Sarah isn't alone anymore. Other translucent figures appear around her, 13 of them, all the other victims, and together they create a circle around the manager that he can't cross. He actually tries to push through, but some invisible barrier holds him in place, supernatural justice trapping him in the center of Caitlin's living room while he screams about ghosts and echoes. I grab my phone with shaking hands and call Detective Maddox, and when he answers, I can barely get the words out, explaining where we are, what happened, that the facility manager is here and tried to kill Caitlin. Maddox's voice goes sharp and focused, telling me he's been investigating the manager separately, that forensic accounting found unexplained income matching the timeline of the murders, deposits that couldn't be explained by his salary. He says units are already on the way, that I need to keep the manager contained until they arrive. Francisco grabs a lamp, holding it like a weapon, keeping pressure on the manager who's now curled on the floor inside the circle of victims, rocking back and forth and muttering about shadows and death. The police arrive within minutes. I can hear sirens getting closer, and when they burst through the door, the victims fade away, their purpose served. The manager is babbling about ghosts and echoes, completely unhinged now that his careful planning has collapsed, and the officers have to physically restrain him as he thrashes and screams. Paramedics arrive right behind them, checking Caitlin immediately, and one of them tells me she'll be fine, that the sedative was mild and she'll wake up confused, but unharmed. Detective Maddox shows up last, surveying the destroyed living room, and he pulls me aside while Francisco gives his statement to another officer. Maddox apologizes for suspecting me, explaining that the psychological evaluation was partly to protect me and partly to see if I'd slip up if I was involved. He admits the security footage showing me alone was deeply troubling, that he couldn't ignore it professionally, even though his instincts said I was telling the truth. But he's seen enough strange things in this case now, he says quietly, to believe something unusual is happening, something that doesn't fit in official reports, but that he knows in his gut is real. Sarah stands on the sidewalk next to the police car, watching the officers secure the manager in the back seat. I can see through her now, her form barely holding together, but her face shows something I haven't seen before. Peace. The other victims appear beside her, 13 translucent figures forming a line along the curb, and they all watch with the same expression. Justice coming after so long trapped in darkness. Sarah turns to me, and her lips move, but I can barely hear her voice anymore. Their echoes can finally rest now, she says, the connection between our worlds already starting to fade. They served their purpose. They reached out across death itself to make sure their killer faced consequences. Now, they can move on to whatever comes next. I want to ask where they're going, but she's already disappearing, her outline dissolving into the morning air. The other victims fade too, one by one, until I'm standing alone on Caitlin's front lawn, watching the police car drive away with a serial killer in custody. The ambulance doors are still open, and I climb in to check on Caitlin. She's lying on the stretcher with an oxygen mask over her face, eyes fluttering open as the sedative starts wearing off. The paramedic tells me she's stable, that the drug was mild enough it'll clear her system in an hour or two. Caitlin pulls the mask down and tries to smile at me. Her voice comes out rough and confused. "What happened?" she asks, and I explain everything in a rush. The manager breaking in, Francisco tackling him, Sarah and the victims appearing to trap him until police arrived. She listens with wide eyes, and when I finish, she actually laughs. This weak, exhausted sound that turns into a cough. "Of course," she says. "Of course I had to make our relationship interesting by involving supernatural murder investigations. She can't just have a normal boyfriend who works maintenance and watches Netflix. No, she gets the guy who talks to ghosts and catches serial killers." I've never been more relieved to hear her sarcasm. It means she's going to be okay. The paramedic clears her to go home after another 20 minutes of monitoring, and I help her back into her apartment where Francisco is giving his statement to 2 officers. He looks exhausted, blood dried under his nose from where the manager hit him, but he grins when he sees Caitlin walking. The police finish taking our statements and leave, promising to follow up if they need more information for the case. Francisco helps me clean up Caitlin's destroyed living room, picking up broken furniture and sweeping up shattered glass while Caitlin sits on the couch wrapped in a blanket. We don't talk much. We're all too tired and shocked to process what just happened. Francisco leaves around noon and Caitlin falls asleep on the couch, so I sit on the floor next to her and finally let myself feel everything I've been pushing down. The terror of seeing that knife, the relief of Sarah appearing, the weight of knowing this is actually over. Over the next week, forensic teams tear apart the storage facility unit by unit. I watch the news coverage showing investigators in white suits carrying evidence boxes out of the building. They find 3 more units the manager had been using over the years, each one containing carefully organized records, dates, names, locations where he and Richard grabbed their victims, photos documenting what they did. The manager kept everything, this sick archive of 17 murders spanning 5 years. The news reports the total victim count climbing. 14 in Unit 4-47 like we originally found, plus 3 more whose remains were disposed of differently before Richard and the manager perfected their storage method. 17 people total. 17 families who spent years not knowing what happened to their loved ones. Detective Maddox calls to update me on the investigation. "The forensic evidence is overwhelming," he says. "The manager's DNA all over the storage units, his fingerprints on containers, financial records showing unexplained expenses matching the timeline of each murder. The case against him is so strong his lawyer is already talking about a plea deal to avoid trial. But the manager refuses to plead guilty. He wants his day in court, wants to tell his story to the world." 3 weeks after the arrest, the manager gives a full confession to prosecutors. Not because he feels guilty, because he wants credit for what he did. His lawyer releases a statement saying his client is cooperating fully with investigators to bring closure to victim families. What the statement doesn't say is that the manager is enjoying this, enjoying the attention, the infamy, the chance to explain his work. I read the leaked details of his confession in the news, how he and Richard Landon met in college and discovered they shared dark fantasies about power and control, how those fantasies grew darker over years of friendship until they decided to make them real. Their first victim was a homeless woman nobody would miss. It felt so easy that they kept going. Richard handled the killing while the manager handled logistics, renting storage units under fake names, buying the industrial freezers, creating the preservation system that kept evidence fresh. They were partners for 10 victims. Then Richard started having doubts, started talking about stopping, about the guilt eating him alive. The manager knew Richard would eventually break and confess everything. So he killed his partner and staged it as a suicide, writing a confession that blamed Richard for everything. The perfect frame job that would have worked if I hadn't opened that freezer and if Sarah hadn't reached out from wherever the dead go. The manager explains all this calmly in his confession. No remorse, just pride in his planning. He only made one mistake, he says. He underestimated the victim's ability to fight back even after death. The grand jury indictment comes down in early December. 17 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder for Caitlin, multiple counts of abuse of a corpse, kidnapping. The list goes on for pages. I have to testify before the grand jury about finding the freezer and everything that happened after. I sit in a windowless room with 23 strangers and walk them through opening that storage unit, seeing the containers, the heart sliding across the floor. I describe the woman who led me there, how she looked exactly like Sarah Landon even though Sarah was already dead. I leave out the supernatural elements in my official statement. I talk about psychological stress, possible hallucinations from trauma, the way grief and shock can make people see things that aren't there. But after I finish testifying, Opal Schneider pulls me aside in the hallway. She's the forensic psychologist who evaluated me after I was first brought in for questioning. She says my testimony was compelling, but she noticed what I left out. The details that don't fit any psychological explanation. How I knew things about the victims I couldn't have known. How the security footage showed me responding to someone who wasn't there. She believes something beyond normal experience occurred, she says quietly. She's seen enough cases in her career to know that some things can't be explained rationally. She won't put it in any official report because it would destroy her credibility. But personally, she believes the victims reached out to me somehow. That justice required something impossible. I thank her for believing me even though I can barely believe it myself anymore. The supernatural elements already feel like a dream, something that happened to a different person in a different reality. Sarah appears one last time in my apartment that night. I'm sitting on my couch trying to process the grand jury testimony when the temperature drops and I see her forming in the corner. She's barely visible now, just an outline of light that I can see through completely. She moves closer and I can barely hear her voice, like she's speaking from very far away. She came to say goodbye, to thank me for being brave enough to listen when she reached out. She says the other victims are grateful too. We gave them justice when everyone else had given up on finding them. The grand jury indictment means their killer will face consequences. Their deaths will be acknowledged. Their families will have answers. That's all they needed to finally rest. I ask if she's going somewhere better now. Sarah smiles, and her voice comes stronger for just a moment. She doesn't know exactly where she's going, but it feels warm and peaceful. Nothing like the cold darkness where she's been trapped since Richard killed her. She can feel the other victims there too, waiting for her, ready to move on together. She starts to fade and I stand up, wanting to say something meaningful, but no words feel adequate. Thank you seems too small for what she did, for reaching across death to stop a killer, for trusting me to help when I could barely function from terror. Sarah's outline disappears completely, and I feel the temperature in my apartment return to normal. The supernatural presence that's been hovering at the edge of my awareness for weeks is finally gone. The air feels lighter somehow, empty but clean. Whatever connection existed between the living and the dead has closed. I'm alone again in a world that makes sense according to normal rules. Part of me feels relieved. Part of me feels the loss of something profound I'll never fully understand. Caitlin and I have long conversations about what happened over the next few weeks. We sit up late at night trying to make sense of ghosts being real, of murder victims reaching out from death to help solve their own case. She admits she's struggling to process it. Her entire worldview was based on rational explanations and scientific evidence. Now she knows for certain that something exists beyond death. That consciousness doesn't just end when the body stops. It's terrifying and comforting at the same time. We decide to try therapy together to work through the trauma. Both of us recognize we need professional help to deal with what we experienced. I find a therapist who specializes in violent crime trauma, and we start going twice a week. I still can't talk about the supernatural elements because they sound crazy even to me now, but I can talk about the fear, the helplessness, the weight of knowing 17 people died horrible deaths. The therapist helps us develop coping strategies for the nightmares and panic attacks. Slowly, we start feeling more normal, more like ourselves before all this happened. Francisco quits the storage facility 2 weeks after the manager's arrest. He calls to tell me he got a job at a regular warehouse across town. He says he can't be around those units anymore without remembering what we found, without seeing the manager's face when Sarah appeared. He has nightmares about the freezer, about containers with names on them, about ghosts trapped in darkness. The new job pays less, but his mental health is worth more than money. We stay friends, though. We meet for coffee every week and talk about what happened. He's the only other person besides Caitlin who witnessed the supernatural elements and understands what really occurred. Everyone else thinks we had a shared delusion from trauma, but Francisco and I know the truth. We saw Sarah and the other victims appear. We watched them trap a killer with powers that shouldn't exist. That knowledge bonds us in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who wasn't there. The facility shuts down temporarily while the investigation continues. Corporate decides the PR damage is too severe to keep operating. They're talking about selling the property to developers who'll tear it down and build something else. I'm placed on paid leave while they figure out what to do with employees. I use the time to visit the families of the victims. I track down their addresses through news reports and public records. I show up at their doors and introduce myself as the person who found the freezer. Most of them invite me in. They want to hear the story from someone who was actually there. I tell them the official version first. How I opened the unit, found the containers, called the police. Then, if they seem open to it, I tell them the rest. How their loved one reached out to help catch the killer. How Sarah Landon appeared to me and guided the investigation. How the victims worked together from beyond death to bring justice. 3 families believe me immediately. They say they felt their loved one's presence after they went missing, felt them trying to communicate. They're grateful to know they weren't crazy, that their instincts were right. The other families think I'm dealing with trauma through fantasy, but they appreciate the gesture anyway. They thank me for helping find justice, even if they don't believe the supernatural parts. One mother hugs me and cries, saying it doesn't matter how her daughter's killer was caught. What matters is that he was caught, that her daughter's death is acknowledged, that the family can finally have closure and start healing. Detective Maddox calls me 3 days after my last family visit to say the case is officially closed. He asks me to come down to the station to sign some final paperwork. When I arrive, he takes me to a small conference room instead of an interview room, which feels less threatening. He sits across from me with a folder of documents and slides them over. The top page says the investigation is complete, and the manager is being charged with 17 counts of first-degree murder, plus 1 count of attempted murder for what he did to Caitlin. Maddox leans back in his chair and tells me the department is recommending me for a civilian commendation for bravery. I almost laugh because I spent most of the experience scared out of my mind. He shakes his head and says, "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done, despite being terrified." He tells me he's seen enough in his career to know some things can't be explained rationally. He doesn't elaborate, and I don't ask him to. We both understand there are aspects of this case that the official reports will never capture. He stands up and shakes my hand, saying I did good work, and the families have closure because of me. I sign the paperwork and leave feeling strange about being called brave when I was just trying to survive. The manager's arraignment happens the following week, and the news coverage is everywhere. His lawyer tries to argue insanity based on his claims about ghosts and supernatural events, but the prosecutor shuts that down immediately by presenting evidence of meticulous planning over multiple years. The freezer was purchased specifically for storage. The victims were chosen carefully based on their lack of close family ties. The disposal of remains was methodical and organized. Everything points to a man who knew exactly what he was doing and took steps to avoid getting caught. The judge denies bail, calling him a flight risk and a danger to the community. 17 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole is what the prosecutor is seeking. I watch the news coverage from my couch with Caitlin, both of us quiet as they show photos of all the victims. Sarah Landon's picture appears, and I feel that same warmth from before, like she's acknowledging that justice is finally happening. I can't go back to the old storage facility. Even thinking about walking through those hallways makes my chest tight. Corporate puts me on paid leave while they figure out what to do with the property, but I need to work. I need normal routine to stop my brain from replaying everything. I apply to 3 different storage facilities across town and get hired at the second one I interview with. The manager there is a woman in her 50s named Ivy, who knows my history because it was all over the news. She tells me during the interview that anyone who helped catch a serial killer deserves a second chance at normal employment. She says she appreciates honesty and courage, and she's willing to give me a shot if I'm willing to work hard. The facility is smaller, above ground, with lots of windows and natural light. No basement units. No climate-controlled sections that feel like tombs. I start the following Monday doing the same maintenance work I did before, but everything feels different now. Better. Safer. Caitlin and I have been talking about moving in together for months, but after everything that happened, we both want the security of not being alone. We find an apartment in a newer building with big windows and an open floor plan. Everything is bright and airy, the complete opposite of that dark storage basement. We move our stuff in over a weekend with help from Francisco. While we're unpacking kitchen items, Caitlin holds up a small chest freezer someone gave us as a housewarming gift. We look at each other, and she immediately puts it back in the box. We both agree we can't have one in our home. The association is too strong. We donate it to a charity shop the next day and buy a regular upright freezer instead, the kind where you can see everything inside without reaching down into darkness. Bryony Hayashi, the victim advocate who worked with the families, starts checking in with me regularly. She calls every few weeks to see how I'm doing and whether I need any resources. During one call, she mentions a support group for people who've encountered violent crime. She says talking to others who've been through trauma can help more than I'd expect. I'm hesitant at first, because I can't share the supernatural parts without sounding crazy, but I decide to try one meeting. The group meets in a church basement on Thursday nights. There are 8 people sitting in a circle when I arrive. A woman facilitates and asks if anyone wants to share. I talk about finding the freezer and the organs inside. I talk about the fear and the nightmares, and feeling like I can't trust my own perception of reality anymore. I leave out Sarah and the echoes and the supernatural justice. But talking about the trauma of discovery, the weight of knowing 17 people died horrible deaths, the guilt of wondering if I could have found them sooner, all of that helps more than I expected. Other people nod and share their own stories. We're all carrying similar weight, just different details. 6 months pass in a blur of work and therapy, and slowly rebuilding normal life. Then the trial date arrives, and I have to testify. The courthouse is downtown in a building with marble floors and high ceilings. I wait in a witness room until they call me. When I take the stand, the defense attorney immediately tries to discredit me by bringing up the security footage that showed me talking to no one at the front desk. He suggests I hallucinated the entire interaction with Sarah Landon. The prosecutor objects, and the judge sustains it. The prosecutor asks me to describe exactly what I found in Unit 447. I go through it step by step, keeping my voice steady. The frozen containers, the labels with names and dates, the heart sliding across the floor. The defense attorney can't shake my testimony about the physical evidence because it's all documented. My credibility issues don't matter when there are actual human remains that were found exactly where I said they were. The jury deliberates for only 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. I'm sitting in the gallery with Caitlin when the foreman reads the verdict. 17 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, guilty on every single charge. The families of the victims cry with relief. Some hug each other. Others just sit there looking stunned that it's finally over. I feel a warmth in the courtroom, the same sensation I felt at Sarah's grave. I can't see her or any of the other victims anymore, but I sense they're here witnessing their killer face justice. The warmth spreads through the room like sunlight breaking through clouds, and for just a moment, everything feels right. The sentencing happens 2 weeks later. The judge gives the manager 17 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. As the bailiffs lead him away in handcuffs, he turns and looks directly at me. His eyes are hollow and haunted. He mouths something I can barely make out. They're still here. I realize he can still sense the victim's echoes even though I can't anymore. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, haunted by the people he killed, feeling their presence constantly, but never finding peace. That seems like justice to me, both legal and supernatural. Francisco calls me that evening while I'm making dinner with Caitlin. He sounds excited, almost giddy. He tells me he's engaged to his girlfriend, Maria. The experience of nearly dying made him realize he didn't want to waste any more time. He wanted to commit to building a real life with someone he loves. He invites Caitlin and me to the wedding in 3 months. I congratulate him and tell him we'll definitely be there. After I hang up, Caitlin asks what that was about. I explain, and she smiles, saying it's good to have something positive come from all the horror we survived, something to celebrate instead of just process and recover from. We finish making dinner and eat together in our bright apartment with big windows, and for the first time in months, I feel genuinely hopeful about the future. Missing Persons Organization reaches out to help communities find their missing loved ones. I spend weekends answering phones and organizing search parties and sitting with families who just need someone to understand what waiting feels like. The work drains me sometimes, but it also fills something that was empty after everything that happened. I'm making sure other people don't have to face the same horror I did, that families get answers even if those answers hurt. Caitlin comes with me sometimes, and we've become a team at the organization, her handling the administrative side while I work directly with the families. We've helped close 3 cases in the past year, finding people who wandered off with dementia or ran away from bad situations, and each time someone gets found alive, it feels like a small victory against the darkness that took those 17 victims. I still think about Sarah and the others sometimes, wondering if they found peace or if echoes of them exist somewhere I can't see anymore. I choose to believe they're somewhere better, that their pain ended when justice came, and that our connection across whatever separates life from death meant something real. The warmth I felt in that courtroom when the verdict came down wasn't my imagination. Neither was the breeze at Sarah's grave or the sense of gratitude I felt standing there with flowers in my hands. They reached out because they needed help, and I was able to give it to them, and that matters more than any supernatural explanation or rational doubt. On quiet nights when Caitlin's already asleep, I'll sometimes feel that warmth again, like someone saying thank you from very far away. I take it as proof that helping those victims was the most important thing I'll ever do in my life. My days are normal now, beautifully and perfectly normal, filled with work and love and small moments of happiness that I treasure, because I know how fragile everything can be. But I carry knowledge that most people don't have, an understanding that there's more to existence than what we can touch or measure. Sometimes the dead need the living to speak for them and bring their stories into the light, and I was lucky enough to be the person who could do that when it mattered most. Well, that's another wild ride to add to the list. If you're still watching, I admire your patience or your poor taste. Either way, hit subscribe so we can do this again.